Good evening, and thank you for tuning in to Veterans Voices. Tonight, we are talking with veterans who became first responders. We have a great show ahead, so please stay tuned. Tonight's Shadowbox belongs to Sergeant First Class James Patrick McMurry. He joined the Navy in 1988 and served 4 years as quartermaster on two different ships. He began his career with the California Army National Guard as an infantryman in 1992, a career that spanned 15 years and called him to Afghanistan and Iraq as a counterintelligence agent. He was awarded the Bronze Star during Operation Iraqi Freedom. James not only served his country, but his community as well. He spent 25 years with the Antioch Police Department. He retired as a corporal in 2015. James has since passed away, but he will always be remembered for his love of family and his faith. Welcome to Veterans Voices. I'm Erin, your host for tonight's show. Veterans Voices is a monthly television show that explores important issues that affect the veterans community. We encourage you to participate in the conversation tonight. If you'd like to ask a question, please send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. We would love to hear from you. This evening, Veterans Voices will be talking about veterans as first responders who continue to serve after the military. And we'll visit some innovative programs across the country that train veterans to continue a life of service. Tonight, our live guests are Brandon Correia, Jeremy Salizzoni, Jonas Aguiar, and Amanda Price, who are all veterans who have made the transition to public service. We'd like to welcome you all to the show tonight.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.
So, as we mentioned previously, our show's focus tonight is about veterans who continue their service after taking off the military uniform, which is what each of you have chosen to do. So, we'd like to kind of start off and talk about each of your military service. So, we'll go ahead and start with Officer Brandon Correia. We can go ahead and bring up a photo of Brandon, your early military service, and let us know about your military background.
Hey, thanks again for having me on. I'm Brandon Correia, CHP officer, and one of the first photos you're going to bring up is this very embarrassing photo of a 19-year-old that barely knew what he was doing. But that's okay because I signed the contract to go to the Marine Corps. I ended up doing 4 years as an electrician, basically with power plants, different units that powered up F-18s, and then went overseas with F-18s and those old school Harrier jets. God, that is an embarrassing photo. Look at that. That's great. And I did my 4 years, and then I got out after 4 years as a sergeant, and I really wanted just to kind of become myself. There wasn't any negative experiences that made me get out. I just wanted to figure out like who I was outside of the military. But man, so many good experiences and positive things that I can recall to this exact day on a whim. And I've never been in a job interview ever where the Marine Corps did not come up. Every single one, they go, "Oh, you're in the Marine Corps. Let's talk about that." And it's always a phenomenal reflection of who I am and traits and characteristics that made me who I am from that early age when I joined the Marine Corps.
So that means your military service has already stood out in every aspect of your life. And we'll touch on that a little bit later in the show. So our next guest, we'd like to go ahead and welcome Amanda Price to the show. And if we can also bring up an earlier photo of Amanda's her military service as well. Picture number 3 is a great way to start off talking about your military service, ma'am.
I think this one's a little bit more embarrassing than Brandon's. So I commissioned into the Army Nurse Corps in 2012 and just recently separated this past February. I served 8 years as a registered nurse in the Army. And yeah, it was a really great experience. I met so many amazing nurses. My family is very heavy in the military. And so I think I was probably the last person they expected to join. But when I thought about what kind of nurse I wanted to be the kind of nurse who needs a nurse more than a soldier?
That's actually a great aspect. And I know we'll again touch upon that a little later in the show as well, as how you continue that service. Thank you. And it looks like you come from a legacy of service, which is awesome and something I can relate to myself. So our next guest is Mr. Jonas Aguiar. We can also bring up photo number 3, talking about your military service.
Hi, Erin. Thanks for having me. Like Amanda, I also came from a lineage of those in the military. Both my grandfathers were in the Army. My mom and dad were both in the Army. So when I brought up to them that I was going to join, they said, "That's fine. You can join the military. Just don't join the Army." And then I told my dad, "Well, I'm going to join the Army." And he said, "Okay, well, that's fine. Just don't join the infantry." So you can tell by my picture exactly what career field I decided I want to go into in the military was the infantry. I went down in Fort Benning in '97. I was down there for 4 years, got out in August of 2001. Great experience, got to go over to Kuwait, got to go to Egypt, traveled a lot and just did a lot of fun stuff and just great experiences that, still helped to shape who I am now, that's for sure.
All right, so you here representing the Army, and it looks like you did everything that your family told you not to do. So
Absolutely. There's a theme there.
there is a theme. Uh, and our last guest we like to bring on is Mr. Jeremy Salizzoni. We have a great photo of you in your early military service, picture number 1. If you can go ahead and tell us a little bit about your military service as well.
I stepped into the military a little bit later than most. I was 20 years old, trying to find the direction. Kept getting drawn toward it, and stepped in. Joined the infantry, United States Marine Corps in '95. I just wanted to see what it was all about. After that, was stationed with the 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines at Camp Pendleton. Deployed twice with them overseas. Got to visit some great countries. Best friends I'll ever meet. Um, Taught me who I am today, changed me entirely, and set me up for a successful career.
So we've got our Army brethren and our Marines very well represented in tonight's show. And I want to thank you all for your service, your prior military service. And like I said, we'll touch upon your new service a little later in the show. But I kind of want to dwell a little bit on your military history here. We've got several good photos to discuss and bring up. And we'll go back to Officer Correia and your photo number 3. Love to be able to kind of talk about that photo quite a bit and let us know what is this photo about, sir?
Well, this is like a direct correlation of me and a life that I once was with the Marine part of me, and then who I am now, which is the CHP officer. But they coexist, right? Like I was a Marine in the beginning, and I learned a lot of stuff, and it kind of molded me to who I am now with traits and characteristics, and then became who I am, and then now I continue a job of service as a CHP officer, and just not that young anymore.
So again, that's actually a great representation of what we're talking about with how you started with your military career and transition into another service. And that's actually a great correlation to look at. So we can definitely touch upon that as well. So for Amanda, I'd like to go back to you too, ma'am. In picture number 10, it looks like we've got some pretty intense stuff going on. You want to describe to us what's happening in that photo?
Sure. So this was a pretty recent photograph of a training event that happened back in October. I was part of a forward surgical team, and so we had taken our entire unit out into the field and practiced splitting into 2 10-man teams. And this was me with our general surgeon practicing transporting open abdominal wounds to a more stable environment for more definitive care.
So that's, I'm sure, pretty relevant a lot to what's happening with your service today. So that again, thank you for sharing that because that will be something for us to discuss a little later as well. So for Jonas, we've got a pretty interesting photo here, number 1. If you'd like to kind of touch upon photo number 1 for us and let us know what's happening here.
Photo 1 was just basically we were conducting some training operations in a mock city down in Fort Benning. So we're looking at it overhead photography to look at the city, how we could best assault the city, trying to line up my squad, break them down into the 2 infantry fire teams, and just really look at the best way to go ahead and assault and get on the objective as quick and safely as possible.
So it's good, some more intense training, just like Amanda Price's photo, which obviously will lend to you all and how you guys operate today. So Jeremy, we'd like to go ahead and maybe discuss picture number 2. Picture number 2 looks pretty solid. like to know what was happening here with picture number 2.
It was graduation from boot camp. Probably one of the proudest days of my life. My wife actually dug that photo up. I didn't even know it existed until I think yesterday. But that was graduation.
So for all of you that have entered into military service, each of you have your own, I'm sure, rendition of what basic military training was like. Anybody care to share a brief description of what that looked like for you?
A lot of this stuff.
I know, Brandon, you had a little, you explained to us a little bit earlier what that looked like for you, aside from a lot of this stuff.
Umpteen stories that we can probably not tell right now. But man, they're just burned into your memory of painful experiences and hilarious experiences all wrapped into one 3.5-month experience.
And I can see a lot of head nods because all of us on this show who have ever been in military service understand what basic military training looks like and the stories behind it. Well, thank you all for your, providing a little bit about your military service. And when we come back, we will continue our conversation with our panel. But first, let's take a look at this interview I did with Winston Miner about an Atlanta, Georgia-based program training veterans for new careers. We'd like to welcome Mr. Winston Miner, who is one of the founders of the Troops to Firefighters organization, and tell us a little bit about your program.
Well, thank you, Erin, and it's a pleasure to be on your program, and thank you for being so kind to ask us to come on and talk about our program. Troops to Firefighters is a nonprofit organization started about 6 years ago, and it was founded by myself. I'm a former fire chief of the City of Atlanta Fire Department, retired, and my co-founder, Dave Harris, founded the organization. He's ex-Air Force and former fire chief at Lockheed Martin Aircraft in Marietta, Georgia. Okay. So we started the program to actually bring transitioning troops, veterans, or their family members into public safety as a career. And we do that through 2 certifications. One is a firefighter certification. The other one is a 911 operator certification program. And we first started out trying to get military folks who we found out are very good for paramilitary organizations such as the fire department. They are very good candidates because they pretty much understand how they're supposed to operate. So what we did with that is we then turned around and said, well, we understand a lot of folks can't actually do the physical work that firefighters have to do. So when we realized that, that's when we came with the 911 operator certification component as to be part of the program. So you have the firefighter piece in the public safety arena as a career, or the 911 operator, and it includes their family members.
That is awesome. So I want to touch on something that you mentioned, because you did mention the fact that you all feel that having former military, transition into the realm of fire, like what you guys do, is ideal because of their service. Can you touch on that a little bit more?
Sure. Again, these individuals are coming out of a military organization, and they're transitioning in our program into a paramilitary organization. So they're familiar with orders and they know how the rank structure is. Many of the officers in our rank structure is same as in the military. So they're very familiar with that, general orders, standing procedures, and those kind of things. And in many municipalities, they will actually give points in the hiring process if you're ex-military.
Okay.
So, so we do understand, and over the years, it has proven to be a fact that when we get these folks with military experience, they're prime candidates.
Yes. So that's good because, obviously our population of our guests and viewers are primarily veterans who have served, or we still have some that are continuing to serve, and may, come a time when it's time for them to transition. So currently, I know you guys are located out over in Georgia, and I know you and I had a chance to kind of chit chat previously and just kind of talk about where you're also located outside of Georgia as well.
Yeah, we get a lot of questions. We basically started on the East Coast. Right now, we have a career skills program at Fort Jackson, Columbia, South Carolina. We also have a relationship with Fort Bragg, North Carolina. The two training sites that we have right now for firefighter are at Fort Bragg and at Fort Jackson. One is the Sand Hills Community College in Pinehurst, North Carolina. The other, of course, is the South Carolina Fire Academy in South Carolina. And I bring those up because we don't actually do the certification. We do the coordinating, we set everything up. In fact, we get a certain number of seats in each one of those classes. So that's what we actually go out and do the recruiting to get people interested in the fire service.
Okay. So you guys are definitely a conduit for those who are transitioning and may need a little bit more assistance finding a place to actually get their training. So that's, I mean, for me, that's ideal because we know that a lot of our military members who transition out may or may not always have a plan and may not always have the resources to connect them with another level of service or career that they want to get into after the military. So I'd like to thank you, sir, for all that you guys are doing to take care of our veterans where they're able to also continue their service in another realm outside of their military service. So thank you from myself and our Veterans Voices crew.
Thank you, and thanks for the opportunity. It's a labor of love.
Thank you so much. Welcome back. Want to be a part of our conversation? Please send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteransvoices@contracostatv.org. So we left off our first session where we talked about the military service of our guests today. And now I'd like to kind of touch upon their transition from military life into civilian life, as well as their civilian service. So we'll start with Brandon. We know that you started off as a Marine and then you transitioned and you're in your uniform today. So talk about what it is that you're doing today and how you got to that point.
Well, today I am a very competent CHP officer, but when I first got out of the military, I was a sergeant leaving the Marine Corps, and they go, "Hey, you want to re-up? You're a sergeant, yada yada." And I go, "No, thanks. I want to get out and find out who I am. I want to become myself." And I think that's weird to say, but that's what I did for about 10 years. I became myself. I went to school. I did I don't know how many jobs that I did not like. And I kept checking the boxes of don't like that, nope, that sucks. And I did a whole bunch of stuff. And I met a lot of great people and I survived, got an education, used my GI Bill. And then it brought me back around to, man, I think I want to do a job that is rewarding, exciting, sometimes dangerous, and pressure packed, similar to the Marine Corps and camaraderie and leadership and all of that. And it brought me back around to doing what my dad did, which was a CHP officer, my uncle, a CHP officer. And man, once I started the path, I didn't even realize I'd be at this point. But man, I would not take it back at all for all the experience from the military to civilian life and becoming who I am. And then entering the CHP as, confident of what my abilities are, kind of how to conduct myself and having all that knowledge and training to go into the CHP and continue this life of service. But a very good, career, good pay. I really like it. And I don't think about any other jobs at all now.
So that's awesome that you actually talked about, you had quite a break between when you left the military and now entering into the CHP. So, you didn't necessarily step right into it. It took you some time because you kind of wanted to shed away a little bit of your military identity in a sense and then enter into service. But that was still at the very core of you, which kind of pulled you back into that line of work. So Amanda, we'd love to hear, ma'am, how did you make that because you're pretty fresh out of your military transition and now into your civilian life. So let's talk about that transition for you.
I am. I'm about 3 months out. And I honestly think I'm still transitioning a little bit. I'm still kind of learning how to be a civilian, I guess. And it was a pretty rough transition, actually. I was ready for it. I was excited. In picture 8, you can see my motivation for getting out. And I thought I was ready. And I got out. I had this nice break of transition leave. and I completely lost all motivation to do anything, really. I was very fortunate that I had positions set up with an ambulance company to do critical care transports, and in an ER to work afterwards, because I really struggled right out of getting out. I lost a piece of who I was.
So yours kind of like Brandon, but so where he was trying to maybe shed away a little bit of that military identity, for you, you actually felt like you lost a piece of it because that's what you were used to. And then you transitioned into civilian life, and it took a little, it was a little rocky. So it's good to see that you found your footing, and we'll definitely touch upon that. So thank you for sharing that. Jonas, we'd like to hear about your transition out of the military into your civilian life.
Yes, when I got out in 2001, I again didn't really know what it is that I wanted to do. I originally grew up in Kansas. That's where I went into the military out of. But I knew I didn't want to go back to Kansas when I got done. So I had some family out here in California. I came out to California and did a lot of different odd and end jobs and went to school for things that I really wasn't interested in, trying to find out what I wanted to do. And I ended up getting a job as a bartender here in Danville, and ended up meeting some firefighters from the local department, and they kind of told me about all the different things that the fire service has to offer. And the more that I heard about it, the more it intrigued me. And then I started taking a class, and then another class, and then went to EMT school, paramedic school, and then it just snowballed after that. And now 15 years later, I'm a battalion chief here with San Juan Valley Fire Protection District. Love every day coming to work. It's again one of those fast-paced environments where you get to learn a lot about what makes you who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are and how you can get better on a daily basis but still challenge yourself. And the transition was tough initially, but once you find what it is that your next mission is, it becomes very easy at that point.
So you use the word mission, and that is absolutely a military centric type word, right? So it's nice to see that you too were able to gain your momentum once you figured out what your actual next mission was, and then you were pretty hungry for it and proceeded on with your service. So we thank you for sharing that as well. So Jeremy, we'd like to hear from you about your transition out of the military into civilian service.
Well, for me, like I said, I got a late jump. I was 20 when I went in. Before that, at 18, I became a volunteer with the Pay Department back home. So the only applicable skill I had was an EMT cert once I got discharged. There was not a lot of call for machine gunners in the civilian sector once I got out. I got hired sight unseen by a local ambulance company back home. And from there, the bug stuck. Whether it was the late nights, no eating, living on coffee, there was just something that just brought me right back to it, that we can do it. Like we can do that in that environment. From there, paramedic school, and went to a fire and saw a crusty old crew captain come walking out of the bottom of the Klamath Basin and said, "That's what I want to do." Started looking at employment with Cal Fire and been there ever since.
Well, we appreciate that as well. And it's, speaking of, we're going to stay on you for a second because we still have quite a few pictures that we'd like to share. And I'm interested in hearing about picture number 6. That looks like something that's happened since you've become part of the fire service. If you can kind of, share with us what's happening there.
The reason I picked that picture, that's myself and one of my partners briefing a crew for a prescribed burn down near Cuyamaca State Park. We do prescribed burns where we're doing the management ourselves. And it always draws me back to when we're briefing back to the military. The Marine Corps especially, I don't have much other experience with other branches, but the briefings always brought me back to that centerpiece. And now that I'm in a position to actually brief other people, it's like a dream come true. It's full circle for me.
And honestly, just hearing you describe that, you can hear the passion in your voice about the fact that you're able to now do that. And it's an extension pretty much of your military service. So it's nice that, you have found yet another sense of purpose for yourself. I'd like to go ahead and maybe address another photo, and that would be photo number photo number 1 for Amanda. Even though this is still kind of tied to your military, because you're just kind of fresh out of your military service and you felt like you lost your identity a bit, I'd like to hear a little bit about that photo.
Yeah, so this is actually a picture. My husband is on the right and my brother is on the left. And this was a military service for my grandfather who served in the Air Force. This picture was actually taken a year ago. And so my youngest brother is down at Fort Benning, and he was unable to be with us. He was in basic training at the time.
Oh, wow. That legacy of service. So I appreciate you sharing that with us. So, the gist here is that you all had, quite a transition from your military service to civilian life, and not necessarily a solid, plan or background. And it sounded as if once you guys got your momentum going and now you're in your first responder roles, it's almost as if you've kind of recaptured that sense of purpose again. So before we go into our next segment, I'd love to hear, Jonas, just one last time from you, just about the fact that even though you may not have had your footing initially, what it means now to have transitioned into your civilian service and fire.
It means everything, finding something that's bigger than yourself to be a part of, something like an organization like the San Juan Valley Fire Protection District, doing everything you can for the community, and making sure that their needs are put above, your own. Is just, it's hard to describe in words what it means to the individuals that do it, I think. And when you look at the lineup of people that you're interviewing today, they all speak of the same things. And I think that's one of those transitions for people getting out of the service, looking for what else that they want to do. And maybe the military wasn't 100% for them as a career. First responders, nurses, it's a very common thread that you see them transition over to, because you still have all of those benefits of being able to serve other people in just different capacities.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate all the feedback you guys have provided for us. When we come back, we will hear more from our panel of first responders. So stay with us.
Hi, I'm Nathan Johnson, Contra Costa County Veteran Service Officer. On April 1st, the 2020 census will be taking place. It's important that veterans understand the census will not share information with other agencies. Your information is protected by the Census Bureau. But most importantly, many veteran service organizations depend on veterans being counted in order to receive funding for their programs. VA clinics, vet centers, and county veteran service offices depend on you being counted. So just remember, Census 2020, count me in.
Did you know that Department of Veterans Affairs provides physical and mental health care for over 8 million veterans? Hi, I'm Natalie Dell. I may be an Olympic medal winner, but I know that real champions are those who have served this country, and VA knows that too. As a VA employee, I've seen the challenges our veterans face. I'm honored to be part of a team that supports veterans in achieving fuller, richer lives, and I invite you to join us in this rewarding experience. If you're a mental health provider, I urge you to visit vacareers.va.gov.
Welcome back. We are talking with veterans who became first responders. We want to welcome you to contact us with your questions and send us a message through Facebook at Veterans Voices 1 or email us at veteranvoices@contracostatv.org. So in our last segment with our panel guests, we talked about their transition from military service into civilian service, and that actually ended up prompting a question. So I'd like to kind of kick off our next segment with this question because it's kind of pertinent to the discussion we're going to have for this particular part of this segment. So question from our audience: have your military connections helped you in your current career? So anybody can take this question, and I'd love to hear your response.
Silence. I don't have any specific connections, but the specific things that happened to me in the military and how I was built up and being able to handle myself and critical thinking, situational awareness, all of that's super important as an officer for the CHP. And with the parallel or a paramilitary experience with our academy, it was a huge resource to tap back into that as an officer. And then when I'm out in the field every day, it's the same exact thing if you're with your fire team or your unit as you are if you're conducting enforcement. And now you have 3 or 4 officers on the scene of whatever it is, and you form your own team and you decide what you're going to do. There's nobody there, micromanaging you. You're the one that's in charge. You're the one that's got to step up and lead. So that was very helpful for me. And from to be hired and while I'm currently working.
So that's a great point that you bring up, because we did want to kind of tie in how your military service, your training, your background kind of ties into the role that you play now, and any parallels or personal experiences that you guys have seen between the two. So we appreciate you sharing that, Brandon, because that does open up the conversation about how your foundation, your military foundation, has played such a huge role in what you're doing now in the parallel. So Amanda, I'd like to hear from you a little bit about that, since you're, the newest one out, and the parallels that you've experienced so far.
I think that as a nurse, transitioning into a civilian role was really easy. A lot of my skill set transitions really easy, but I have a broader knowledge base on trauma, chemical warfare, things like that, that a lot of civilians don't have. That kind of gave me an extra edge. And it really helped me realize how much I value a small team. Some people operate a lot better with a lot of resources and really big teams, but that was one thing that really helped guide me to a more first responder type role. I really enjoy working with my small teams.
So, and that brings up a good point too, because it's not just about your individual training, but how that's utilized in the team mindset. And for all the roles that you all are doing, obviously you're not doing those independently. You are right back into a small family or a unit or a squad. And so a lot of what you're trained to do in the military is centered around that teamwork concept. And so that's a great point to bring up. Jeremy, love to hear from you and see, what parallels or anything that you may have experienced as well with regards to your military training versus what you are doing today.
Well, the obvious one is walking up steep hills with heavy equipment. That's the one parallel that's direct connection. But reflecting on that, looking at picture number 7, I was embedded with the 163rd down at a March Air Force Base flying Predators on the RIM incident, which was out in Yosemite Valley. It was a pretty big monster. But the communication, it was like I'd never left. I sat down with the colonels and the sergeants, and I knew the vernacular and I knew the protocol, and the communication and the briefings. So it was like right back on a bike. The other one is our fire department is so massive in the way we mobilize major incidents, whether it's a wildland fire, flood, dams breaking. The way our department mobilizes is second nature to me, watching the military ramp up, whether it's a joint force, it's just like us. I mean, we're with every fire department and law enforcement, and the cooperation between the agencies and the communication. To me, it just became second nature. It's just a different colored uniform at this point. And I'm older.
Yeah, that's actually, the fact that you are still able to even work alongside of your military brethren is great, because then, it kind of ties in what you're familiar with. You mentioned familiarity, and that's great because it just speaks to the core of you as a prior military service member. We've got some great questions coming in from the audience. I'd like to go ahead and pose those to you guys. We had one of our viewers ask, do any of you all as first responders miss your military service, or has working as, a firefighter, nurse, or police officer kind of filled any particular voids that you may have had?
I don't know if I've had enough time as a civilian to really, I'm still transitioning. I haven't found anything that really, that fills that Captain Price part of me. And so I'm still trying to transition, really.
You're still in your process. Jonas, did you have any insight on that?
I think that you're always going to end up missing the military in some way, whether it's the class 6 or whether it's deploying overseas or being there with your close friends. The military provides you with everything that you could possibly need. So it's hard to really fill those gaps with kind of what you're doing now. It's a different transition in life. But it's the closest thing that I've ever experienced to my time in the infantry. There's no doubt about that. And, I wouldn't trade it for the world. The experiences I got from the infantry have made me and helped propel me in my career to who I am now. So I think they tied hand in hand perfectly for me.
So I have one last question, kind of ties into what you were just talking about, Jonas, but we had one viewer that asked, what do you guys consider was your greatest obstacle from your transition from military to civilian work? Because several of you weren't quite sure what you wanted to do initially, and it took you some time. So Jonas, I saw you just pointed.
I think it has a lot to do with your mindset when you get out, and you lose a part of your identity, which we've all talked about. You're in the military, you're indoctrinated into that system, and then you get out and you don't know who you are. Like Brandon said, he had to find himself. It took him 10 years to figure out what he wanted to do and how he wanted to get there. To me, that was the hardest part for me, was that getting a hold of my own head and understanding that I can go do what I want to do. I have the skills to be successful, and then finding what that next mission was, like I spoke on earlier.
Absolutely. So one last thing I wanted to bring up, and Winston Miner touched upon it in his interview with me, but just the fact that because of your military training and because of the camaraderie and the training that you all have sustained over the years, how that has been able to kind of overlap in what you all are doing today, and the fact that you also continued on serving outside of your military uniform, and the fact that it seems as if veterans serving in these particular types of roles is ideal. I don't know if you had any last thoughts on, just the fact that military service members, when they, transition and they're veterans and they get hired into these first responder roles. Do you guys have any insight on how that, is looked to be seen as truthful? I know some of you guys had mentioned recruiting efforts for your actual services. Now you kind of lean towards veterans.
I know in our organization we look for and try to cultivate that. We try to bring them into the organization through our reserve program. If we have any that apply, they don't get quote unquote preferential treatment, but there's an obvious way in which a veteran carries themselves when they show up to interviews. There's an obvious skill set that they bring to the table that you don't have to teach them. So if we have the ability to hire veterans, obviously we would always like to do that, as
Yeah.
long as they're obviously the most qualified person. But I think that, yes.
Well, we certainly appreciate all of you all's input. I'd like to thank all of our live guests for sharing their stories. Later, we will hear a Veterans Voice segment, our monthly segment that tells a veteran's story in their own words. But first, we'll see my interview with Russell Coonrod, the founder of a New York program training veterans to be EMTs.
I'd like to welcome Russell Coonrod to the show. He is a part of an organization called EMS Strong, and he's also a military veteran himself. So we'd like to welcome you today, Russell, for our show. Thank you for being on.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
So we'd like to start off and just maybe you give us a little insight into who you are, a little bit about your military service, and let's talk about EMS Strong.
Great. Yeah, I joined the Air National Guard at 17 and was a firefighter with them for 6 years. And then I'm one of the few boneheads that went from the Air Force to the infantry, as opposed to the opposite way. So I went over to the Navy, and I was a Navy corpsman attached to 225 2nd Battalion, 25th Marines. And I ended up serving in Afghanistan with 3rd Battalion, 25th Marines, India Company.
Okay, so you've definitely had some experience in the service, and we appreciate you. Even if you transition from Air Force to Navy, we won't hold that against you. No worries. We welcome and we celebrate all service members. So let's get into talking about the organization itself before we kind of expound a little bit more on your military service. So EMS Strong, give us the lowdown on EMS Strong.
Yeah, so quite a few years ago, I was working, I worked full-time as a firefighter, and I was working part-time with an ambulance company. And to the director and one of the assistant directors are both veterans. One's an Army nurse and one is former Navy submarine. So we were talking about, how we can benefit veterans and what we can do, and kind of leveraging our skill set and what we currently do into impacting veterans. So we decided, what if we did a EMT class for veterans, only veterans, taught by mostly veterans, and use it as a way to gain meaningful employment for, originally our demographic was unemployed or underemployed veterans. But what we found was as we went through the program a few times, it was used a lot as a transition tool for veterans that had just gotten out of the military or had been out for a little bit and kind of haven't gotten their feet under them.
Do you feel as if, just kind of speaking about the population of veterans in that transition period, and kind of the gist of our show today is talking about the fact that we have fellow service members who, once they take off their uniform militarily, they go into other types of public service roles, such as EMS. Can you maybe expound on that a little bit and what your experience is and seeing how some of the folks that probably have come across your program are doing it out of a sense of continuing to serve?
Right. You know, that's a perfect analogy. And that's something that we highlight a lot, is it's a way for them to continue their service, right? Just because they put away one uniform doesn't mean that their service has ended. And you know, there's tons of similarities between public safety, EMS, fire, police, and the military. Wear a uniform, right? There's a chain of command, and there's an element of danger, right, in all of those, to where the veterans know that they need to perform, right? The expectation is that they need to perform. And if they don't perform, there could be consequences, not only to them, but the people standing to the right and left of them. So there's so many similarities between those two that it seems like almost a no-brainer for a lot of veterans to slide into those roles. But what we found was the monetary aspect of, so with the police and the fire department, at least in the Northeast, you take a civil service exam, you score high enough, they send you to the police academy or the fire academy. But when you go into EMS, you have to fork out some money up front for the certification prior to getting hired. So there was that hurdle with quite a few veterans, because even if they had jobs where they were comfortable financially, right, they couldn't take time away from those jobs to go get certified.
Yeah.
So what we did was we built a program that was free for the veteran. Not a dollar came out of their pocket. We received donations from the local ambulance company to cover the books. The local ambulance company, Clifton Park Half Moon EMS, actually made them members of the agency, so we were eligible for some reimbursement. We had a local doctor's office, did all the physicals for free. 3M, huge company. There's a office in Albany, New York. They donated high-end stethoscopes and for each veteran. And then 511, big uniform company, they donated uniforms for the veterans. So they came in the beginning with the expectation, you wear your uniform, you do your work, and you'll succeed. So it was very successful. It worked out really well.
It's actually really nice to hear the support that you all have received from the community and from the general public, especially with these larger corporations. When they decide to kind of sign on and support the program, what are some things that you guys do to kind of sell it to them? You know, how do you guys go about kind of getting that support from them?
So, I mean, after the first class was run, there was some local media involvement with that. And to be honest, it was almost an open checkbook from these guys. And it was really impressive to see. That, you know, there were a couple of people I reached out to that were employees of these organizations. And literally the doctor's office that runs physicals, all the nurses came in and did it on their time off for free. So it was just, they really kind of opened the checkbook. So it wasn't hard for me at all, to be honest.
Yeah.
Like I just reached out and kind of showed them what we did, and they were more than happy to do whatever they could for the program.
That's awesome. And I like hearing that there's that support there for you guys to be able to do what you do for the veterans. So I kind of want to transition a little bit. So we kind of highlighted earlier, you yourself are a veteran and you've had your own military background and experience. And I kind of want to delve into, you know, the fact that you transitioned out of the military yourself, and then now here you are with EMS Strong. You know, what drove you to do that?
You know, I say as kind of a joke, right? I run this program because I'm selfish, right? And I'm selfish because I want to be surrounded by these great men and women that I had the privilege of serving with for 10 years. It's just refreshing to be back in that mix. Unfortunately, I'm out now, but to still be surrounded by what I feel like are some of the best men and women in this country, and to help them, it's more than any paycheck could bring me. So, and it's a great way, like I said, to be in the mix with those veterans, and they make my job easy. I've kind of been the face of the program, but it's everybody that's been involved in the program. It's everybody owns a bit of it. We've had instructors that have been there for lab staff, once a week for 6 months. And the first class we ran, none of the instructors took any money at all. So they volunteered their time for 6 months for these vets. And every veteran owns a bit of this program. And we've had veterans come back and help out teaching with lab staff, and they help spread the word. So any chance I get to be surrounded by these men and women, I'll take it.
For sure. For you specifically, have you seen a lot of parallels between what you did while you were a service member to what you're doing now? Can you kind of talk about, like, maybe even just a personal experience that you remember having in the military that just totally relates to what you're doing now?
Yeah, the blanket, one of the blanket statements is the camaraderie, right? The men and women to your right and left. But it really is the truth. I spent 9 months overseas, a few months before that, building up, and I came home and I was on leave for a little bit. But one of the best things I did was get back to work. I was a paid fireman before that, and then because of those parallels, and it definitely rings true. And I think that's why you see so many veterans gravitate towards those lines of work. Yeah.
Well, I'd like to tell you so much from the bottom of our heart here at Veterans Voices. We so appreciate your service and what your organization is doing to not just benefit, the community at large by providing the EMS service, but to also make sure that you are always keeping your veterans, employed and providing them with skill sets that they've all been familiar with through their military training, and then allows them to continue to serve even outside of their military uniform.
Well, it's my pleasure. And one thing, I've been advocating this for quite a bit. We've been doing this program, but anybody out there that wants to run a program like this, it's, I won an award for an instructor award, but the veterans made that easy. Like it was them that won the award, because I've never been involved in a class where they not only did the work they were supposed to beforehand, but they did more work. And they were asking higher level questions than any EMT class I've been a part of. So, once the program's built, the veterans make it easy, and they're the best students I've ever had. So.
That is wonderful to hear. So for our viewers out there, if you're ever interested in maybe getting a little bit more information regarding EMS Strong, I know that Russell is available and will be available for any particular questions that we may have through our Facebook page. And we look forward to keeping this partnership with you and seeing your program continue to thrive. So again, thank you for your time, sir.
No, thank you so much for highlighting this and for your program in general. So appreciate it.
I don't know what it's like.
I don't know what it's like to be in a war.
I don't know what it's like
To be shot at.
to put my life
On the line.
I don't know what it's like.
But I do know no one comes back the same.
No matter how tough you are,
How brave, how patriotic. Anybody can get hurt.
And not just physically hurt.
if you're a service member or in a military family and you're feeling hopeless,
You're not alone. Please call this number.
It's confidential and free.
your family needs you. We need you.
Thank you for your service.
Welcome home.
So welcome to A Veteran's Voice. Today we have with us Navy SEAL Commander John Macaskill. Welcome, John.
Thanks very much, Noga. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So why don't we start with you sharing a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I am out here on the East Coast in Virginia, married with 2 little kids. got a late start. I'm 42 years old, and I've got a almost 3-year-old little girl and an almost 1-year-old little boy. Active duty Navy, I'll be wrapping up my 23-year career here in August of this year. But in the last few months of my military career, I'm actually doing an internship with a nonprofit called Veterans Path. And Veterans Path, we teach mindfulness and meditation to veterans to help them deal with stresses that come with being a military service member. So.
Absolutely. Wow. So you're going to retire soon in August, and you've got some plans. So please, if you would, share a little bit more about how you got into the Veterans Path and where you'd like to take it.
Sure. Well, I'll touch on the plans that you mentioned there first. So I'll be, again, retiring in August, and my wife and little kids and I are going to jump in our RV and do a 6 or 7 month, maybe even a little bit longer, maybe shorter, depending on budget and how we feel. But we're going to jump in our RV and tour the country for a while, just see this great country that I've been serving, but haven't really gotten a chance to see. I've seen it in cross-country drives as I was moving from one side to the next, but I haven't really had a chance to appreciate the beauty of this country. So my wife and I, with the little ones, are going to do a around the country tour and hope to stop in, points of great interest, points of great beauty, but also see interesting people and interview them. That'll be part of the Veterans Path podcast that I run. I'll be doing that as I'm driving around the country, is interviewing vets that have some type of background in mindfulness and meditation or mental health advocacy. So that's a little bit of our plan. How I got involved with Veterans Path, it's kind of a crazy story. Honestly, I guess I should tell you how I got into mindfulness and meditation first. Sure. So about 3 years ago, I got introduced to it by a psychologist that recommended it to me after I was having my own personal struggles with stress, anxiety, depression, survivor's guilt. And this guy recommended it to me. I kind of took it as a side recommendation at first. Didn't think much of it. Yeah. He recommended it to me again, and in all honesty, I kind of, in my mind, I had this stereotype of what meditation was and who meditators were, and it didn't fit who I am. Not that I have anything against that stereotype; it's just not who I am. And then mindfulness, I didn't know what mindfulness was. And he sat down and explained what mindfulness was and the difference between mindfulness and meditation and where they overlap. And then he mentioned the physiology and the benefits, how it works physiologically, and then why it benefits you. So it sounded great. So I thought I'd try it out. Tried it out for a few weeks, went back to him, told him, hey, this isn't working for me. And then he was like, well, you got to do it a lot longer than that and give it more of a chance. So I did do that, did it for about 2 months, every day in the morning with the actual deliberate meditation. And then, throughout the day, just doing some mindfulness drills, trying to be focused on the present, the here and the now. And then I started to see the differences in who I was and how I was taking things, how I was communicating with my friends, my family, how I was appreciating the here and the now and the moment. At the same time, as I was starting to teach people or at least tell people what I was doing, I was trying to figure out what it was I was going to do when I got out of the military. And I looked at some of the jobs that are out there. I mean, many of the jobs that are out there, and nothing really jumped out at me. And then same time, I'm teaching friends and family about meditation and realized right there that the answer was right there in front of my face. Veterans Path brought me on in an internship role, like I mentioned before, in the last several months of my military career. So I'm still active duty, getting paid by the military, not getting paid by Veterans Path, but working for Veterans Path.
Tell us a little bit about what Veterans Path does. When it gathers veterans together, what are some of the things that occur through Veterans Path?
We teach mindfulness and meditation typically in outdoor settings. So we have various retreats, 1-day retreats, 3-day retreats, 5-day retreats. Right now, we're working with veterans who are stress injured or moral injured. PTSD, military sexual trauma, to help them get back to a sense of peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor. And that's where the word path in our name comes from: peace, acceptance, transformation, and honor.
So meditation, mindfulness, yoga, outdoor, nature, community. And there's also, you're involved with Trails of Purpose equine therapy. Maybe you could share a little bit about that too.
Sure. So that's another partnership that came to be between Veterans Path and Trails of Purpose. It came to be because of location, and that's here in Virginia Beach, Chesapeake, Virginia area. I ended up making friends with Kyle and Kayla Aristivo, who are the founders of another 501c3 called Trails of Purpose that offers equine therapy to a very similar population of veterans, stress injured, morally injured, physically injured, so traumatic brain injuries. They may be paraplegic or quadriplegic. And so the equine therapy that they offer is all ground-based. It's not, you're not getting up on the horses and riding them, but you're spending time with them, guiding them through small obstacle courses, learning to work with an animal that has a heart and brain of their own. And that process is mindful. There's a mindful aspect to that. So it's another modality of mindfulness.
Wonderful. So as soon as you retire, you're going to have a whole full plate once again of lots of amazing things.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
It kind of drives my wife a little nuts. Maybe not nuts, but it drives her a little bonkers in that I have to stay busy, and I enjoy working hard to help others. This is just another way of me being able to serve others. I've served in the military for 23 years, almost 24. And I didn't want to be one of those people that when I hang up my uniform, I feel like I've lost my mission or lost my purpose. Yeah. I want to continue to serve. And what I tell Dave Drake, the executive director, is we're all service members. Yeah. It's just we're service members in a different way, right? We may not be wearing a military uniform, but we are serving others. And that is true. That's what a service member is, and that's why I think it's important to continue that mission of service after we hang up the uniform.
And the podcasts are on Facebook. I've watched some of them. They're very powerful.
Great.
Just listening to other people's journeys and where they've been and where they've gotten to with so much strength and courage. Wonderful.
Oh, thanks very much.
Thank you so much, John. Okay.
Yeah, this has been a pleasure.
Thank you for tuning in to the show tonight. We hope you enjoyed the discussion. Here are a few resources for veterans seeking careers or just wanting to help with our present health crisis. To learn more about careers with the California Highway Patrol, go to chp.ca.gov. CAL FIRE can be reached at fire.ca.gov. The Veterans Crisis Line provides a lifeline to vets in crisis 24 hours a day. Talk to someone by calling 1-800-273-8255 and pressing 1, or go to veteranscrisisline.net. Nextdoor can connect you with people in your neighborhood in this time when community is more important than ever. Find them at www.nextdoor.com. Team Rubicon Disaster Response is helping people in this time of need. Learn how to volunteer at teamrubiconusa.org. We'd also like to take some time to thank our sponsors. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the 2020 census. Now more than ever, it is important for veterans to stand up and be counted. The Veterans Affordable Home Program, serving those who served us, ensuring the American dream for our veterans, and the Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa. So be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, June 8th at 7 p.m. Be sure to tune in. We want to send all of our well wishes to all our veterans and their families during these difficult times. Thank you for watching and have a great evening.